Hello, everybody, and welcome to Making Sense podcast. Today, we're talking about those who support and service for those who are deployed, military families. Military Appreciation Month is coming up, and although I feel like every month is really Military Appreciation Month at Navy Federal, in May we take a special time out to talk about the things we do to help military families. I'm Clay Stackhouse. I'm a regional outreach manager in marketing and communication. I'm here with my colleague, Chelsea Smith. Chelsea's a marketing and communications specialist and military spouse. So, we decided today we're going to talk about how Navy Federal reaches out and helps people. Now, the reason they picked me to do this, and by the way, I'm hosting my first podcast, which I'm really excited about. I was a 25-year Marine. I flew helicopters in the Marine Corps. I'm a retired colonel. I got to fly off carriers and into Africa and Bosnia. I did a bunch of Iraq tours. I got to fly the president, actually, Marine One for Clinton and Bush, and ended up at the Pentagon and then snatched lightning to come here with Navy Federal. Chelsea, why don't you tell everybody a little about yourself?
Hey, Clay, thanks so much for having me today. And basically, my journey in military life as a military spouse began in June of 2007. And very quickly went from having a career in big city life in Houston, Texas, to a very, very rural town in New Mexico and on a fighter pilot base. And I always say I wasn't sheltered or naive about life, but I really had no idea what I was getting into with military life. I came from a patriotic community, but we didn't have a big base where I grew up. So I really had no idea what to expect. We weren't even there very long before we quickly went off to Korea. I had traveled quite a bit domestically, but had never even been outside of the US. And suddenly I'm in Korea, then Germany. It was just, a rapid succession of 8 different assignments in the first 13 years of marriage, with
Wow.
3 of those being overseas. And then anyone in the military knows you also just have those normal life events like having babies. And my husband at the time had emergency open heart surgery when we were in Germany. So it's like life keeps going. You're just doing it in a military community and in various communities around the US and the globe. So he served 22 years. We settled down in Northern Virginia. So that's where I am now. We are no longer together, but I do still love being part of the military community, feel very much connected to it. I'm raising 2 military kids. My boys are here with me in Falls Church, Virginia. And I love being at Navy Federal because I can use all that experience as a military spouse to better serve our members. There are a lot of amazing things from military life, but there are some things I missed out on, or things that didn't work out the way I thought they would. But one of the ways that I find meaning in all that is by serving our military community, especially through Navy Federal.
Yeah, I feel the same way. As a matter of fact, after 25 years of deploying, and my wife was raising children, while I was in a combat zone, and she had twins, and got time to get out after 25 years. And I was doing the transition assistance, the TAP program in DC. And I was with a great Army officer whose wife worked at Navy Federal. And he said, you might want to take a look. It's booming in Pensacola down there. And I thought, I really didn't know that I had snatched lightning by getting in with Navy Federal, because I do get to help. I'm a certified financial education instructor and an outreach manager. So I go out and talk to, like last weekend, I was in Lafayette, Louisiana, and I talked to a combat infantry brigade of Louisiana Guardsmen. And they were going to Djibouti, actually. And one of the kids I signed him up for a membership. And he's from rural Louisiana. Nobody had really told him much about his finances. So I signed him down like he was my son. And we set him up with active duty checking. He knows that there's a Navy Federal in Djibouti. We set him on his online thing all up. I even went over a small budget with him And that's exactly, I think, the types of things that led me to Navy Federal was that I was still going to be able to be linked with the people who said, I'll support and defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic. My son actually is an infantry Marine. Shout out to Shane Stackhouse. He's hard as woodpecker lips, guys. I missed him. I missed him at Easter, but he's in advanced infantry course in Lejeune. And it's just like you said, it's part of our DNA. It's part of who we are. Could you tell me a little bit about how you landed here at Navy Federal?
Yes. So you mentioned TAP, the Transition Assistance Program, and I'm so thankful for that because it was through that my ex-husband learned about SkillBridge and hiring our heroes and all of that. And he said to me one day, they have a program like an equivalent for military spouses. And I have to say I was a little skeptical because it doesn't always work out. But I saw his success with the program and that it gave him a really soft landing as a veteran. And so I said, I'll give that a try. My biggest challenge was I had this huge employment gap because of all the moves, lack of childcare. Even things, I'll give one example. Like we live in the National Capital Region. When your kids are, daycare age, preschool, like before elementary school, if you can find a place, that you feel good about for your children, if you get orders in time to even do the research, all that, often these places have wait lists or they have a one-time payment, especially in this area that's very expensive. It might be, well, for your family, you only have to pay this one time. It's $1,000 or something, but you just pay it one time. But when you're only going to be there for a year, maybe two, that does not make financial sense. I remember one time there was a job, like a retail job in Tucson, Arizona. I was shopping at one of my favorite stores. The manager approached me, was interested, would you like a job? And I talked to my husband about it. And he said the juice isn't worth the squeeze in terms of dealing with, questions we have like, well, my income isn't taxed in this state, but if you're working, then do we have to pay taxes? That kind of stuff comes into play too when you're overseas. Is there childcare? If there is, can we afford it? I had a good career before, but these jobs would not be as high paying. And so would I make enough to balance that out? Plus, you have needs of the military come first. He's the mission essential one. So things like I was back in school. I have an undergraduate degree in hotel and restaurant management, but I went back to school to consider a career change. So we're in Tucson, Arizona. The local community college has a great program that allows me to take classes for the same cost as active duty members. So that's another example I'd give where if local institutions want to support military spouses, things like that help a lot because it made it financially possible for me. And I liked being able to go in person to classes. It gave me a sense of community too that I didn't have otherwise.
Yeah, Chelsea, that's a great point. And, I guess we've been married, 33 years now. And my wife has bought and sold houses with Navy Federal when I was gone, and knowing power of attorney things that she needed. There is just so much information I found now that I'm doing this job about spousal employment, about the financial advisors that we have that are free that you can sit down with, the employee opportunities, all the different podcasts that we do like this, the Making Sense podcast. I didn't really used to look at. Now I've educated my children in large part. I told you about the rock hard Marine, his twin sisters studying law, and but they're pretty financially savvy because from a young age, I showed them all the little things that we offer. The Navy Federal Serves, Military Life Makes Sense, all those kinds of things that we have. And I told them about their CDs. As a matter of fact, they got CDs for Christmas. And they said, Daddy, what's a CD? And I thought, it's a perfect time for a financial discussion.
Yeah, so, how do you wrap a CD?
I put it in an envelope to show them that they had it, and I put it in their stocking.
Nice.
So they thought it was going to be, and I said, it is a card with money in it. You just can't touch it for 12 months. But yeah, and I think the reason Navy Federal, we say, members are the mission, and I think it's knowing you knowing that intimate thing of what it feels like to be out in the middle of New Mexico at a base and not knowing anybody there. Obviously, you have the unit, but oftentimes the unit's deployed. You haven't met a lot of the spouses before. Of course, when I was in the Marine Corps, we spent a lot of time, you know, ashore, like in the Congo, and we used to write letters, But the guy's face when I told him we actually had a branch there on the base he was going to be there in Djibouti. I think, what do we have? 360 odd branches around the world.
Yeah, it's over 365.
Yeah. I mean, I would go to the one, we have one in Rota. I remember we'd do the washdown, and I got to the Naval Academy in 1986. And one of the first things they teach you to say is "Beat Army," and then soon thereafter, you go over and you sign yourself up for a Navy Federal account. So, yes, since 1986, Navy Federal's been taking care of me and my family. So, I think we talk about support for those who serve, and Navy Federal helps financially. That's what we're set up for. That's all we do. And so, when people like us who have lived it, right, who have and know the even the college loans and how's the GI Bill work. You can get all sorts of information. And if you don't know, we're partnering with the USO on a letter writing campaign. We've made a $9 million commitment to the USO, and the links to these things are all in show notes. So go after and look at the show notes, because us just yucking it up for a little while can't nearly cover it. And I love, like, when I stop in the USO when I'm in airports, and often if it's not just to get a glass of water, I say hi to the guys and gals in there, and it really does feel like family.
Yes, I've used those lounges. I always say, we don't have to have club access. We have USO access. And some of my best memories as a military spouse and for my children are, were brought to us by the USO. So I love knowing that I work for a financial institution that is supporting organizations like the USO that directly impact, like they are boots on the ground serving military families and members across the world. And I'll give two examples. One is, again, that little base in rural Japan, Misawa. My children had amazing experiences that other kids typically wouldn't have. They miss out on a lot of just normal, what we, think of as American kid experiences. So Sesame Street Live, the USO brought it to us. We had it at a little convention center off base. And you would have thought you were dropped into America the way it looked. And all the children were given the toy souvenirs for free. And just holding my little ones, they were a toddler and a preschooler at the time. And just, them seeing Elmo in Japan was amazing. So well done, USO, for that. And then also when we were in Germany for over 3 years, and my oldest son was 18 months old at the time, and 2 days before we left, so we're in temporary lodging facilities, or is that what TLF stands for? I think some of y'all are probably out there correcting me right now, but you know what I mean. But 2 days before we left, I found out I was expecting our second child. And, traveling internationally is hard anyway. And when, and you're not feeling great, maybe, and the stress, but we get off of a flight at BWI at the airport, not far from here, in a national capital region. And we're on a flight with a bunch of people coming back from a deployment, and they're still in their military uniforms. Yeah. We get off the airplane, it's the middle of the night, and we're greeted with all this cheering and clapping and goodie bags, and it's a bunch of USO volunteers. And I remember thinking, oh, they're here for the soldiers and the airmen, but they made it very clear they were there for us too, for the spouses and kids. And it just meant the world to me coming back to the U.S. and being greeted by these wonderful USO volunteers.
And again, just a part of that tapestry that just it creates who you are as a person throughout, that lifespan for that. Like you said, you talked about getting married, you talked about being overseas, you talked about having children, you talked about coming back from overseas, and all those things are things that I think I'm really happy that Navy Federal's familiar with and cares, puts people in positions where they're familiar with that. Yeah, I really appreciate talking to you. I appreciate, I mean, I know how my wife figured out I got forced down into Abu Ghraib prison in 2004, and we had to land there and spend the night under some. Well, she learned about that at a coffee for the spouses. They're like, "Hey,
Mm,
did you hear that Clay went down in Abu Ghraib?" And she's like, holding her coffee, trying to keep it together. So
hmm
hearts out to all those spouses. This is all about those who serve. And I think we all know that it's not just the people wearing the cloth of the country and deploying who are serving. It's the moms and the dads. I think being a military father is harder than being in the military because I can't control it. The brothers and sisters and just all the families who are going through this together. I think it's just important that in Military Appreciation Month, we know that we are there for them. 888-842-6328 is a 24-hour phone line. You can look at our website. You can see our podcast. You can call, see what's going on with your accounts. Uh, but it's more than just a saying to us. Chelsea, I know you've lived it.
hmm
I've lived it as well. And it's important to us, especially in May, that everybody knows that. You want to
hmm
close it out here, Chelsea?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of stuff came to mind as you were speaking. I actually have a little confession. I didn't join Navy Federal until I became our first military spouse fellow, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
So, like you, my ex-spouse went to a military academy, different one, but I asked him because, of course, I love Navy Federal. Like, the more I learn about it, the more I love it. But I said, why didn't you join? And he said, because it had Navy in the word. And
Mhm.
that's not a good reason, but I remember like one of my favorite assignments was in northern Japan. It's a little base called Misawa, which anyone who's ever been assigned there, they know how special it is. It's this little hidden gem, and it snows about 6 months out of the year there, but it's like living in a snow globe. It's the perfect,
Oh,
beautiful
wow.
snow, and it's a rural community, as I said, and where we have a beautiful relationship with the local people. And my boys had the chance to go to Japanese preschool, full immersion. And anyway, I get homesick for Japan now, especially in sakura, the cherry blossom season. So we do have them in DC, but I'm sorry, it's not
Not the
quite the
same.
same thing. But I say all that to say I remember being on base and seeing the brick and mortar Navy Federal branch. And I am one of those people that I love that we have virtual options.
Me
Online
too.
is great, but there's nothing quite like being able to walk in and talk to a person face to face. And usually the people working at those branches are military spouses or
Hmm.
veterans. And so
Yeah.
they've lived it and they can come alongside you or me and in a really high stress situation and understand what our needs are and they're familiar with the products and services and what might help us out. So that's one thing that I look back and I think, gosh, I wish I had joined sooner. I just didn't know. And then another thing is we never bought a house. I know a lot of military families, some kind of have multiple properties and it's the source of additional income and all that. We didn't want to be landlords, and we saw a lot of stressful situations where the member would have to get to the next assignment and the family would have to stay behind because they're trying to sell or rent the
Hmm.
house or whatever. And we thought we have enough stress. We don't need to add more. So we finally decided we're going to buy our first house at our final assignment, which ended up being, in the DC area. And then again, it was COVID 2020. And we bought our house like a lot of military families, sight unseen.
Yeah.
And even we got, a record low mortgage rate. And if we ever sell it, I love knowing that another veteran could benefit from that. If we sell to somebody else who has a VA loan, and just things like that, that someone at Navy Federal is going to know and can trust that we're not going to recommend something that we don't think would be advantageous for them. That was another thing I didn't know, that Navy Federal was a not-for-profit. So
Nonprofit, right?
yeah, and so it's to me, it's about the trust, the loyalty, the that we're steadfast, we're not going anywhere, and it's that kind of one-stop shop that you can do pretty much anything with us, and areas that we don't have yet, we're growing. We've grown exponentially.
Yeah. Well, when I go to those events, like I told you, I was in Louisiana, and I'm talking to a young trooper about why Navy Federal. Almost every time I can say, Private Smith, are you, and I didn't say Smith because your name's Private Jones. Are you a member? Yes, sir, I'm a member. I'm like, okay, tell him why he should be a member. And I'll let them set up their mobile app and tell them, oh no, man, you need to be in active duty checking, because they pay you the day before and all this kind of stuff. And and I'm able to let their buddies just convince each other.
Yes.
And that's satisfying. So good.
And the overseas, the other thing is like I mentioned, the overseas banking that, they're staffed a lot of times by military spouses and veterans. And I remember that too, being told like, those are good jobs. And I thought, I don't know anything about finance but I had a customer service background. And again, that would have been a great job. And then you can build a career. That's why I came here again as a military spouse fellow. But then once I got in the door, I started meeting all these other military spouses. And so we have it's kind of like probably what you experience as a veteran. You have that shared language, shared experience, and we support one another. And so even at Navy Federal, I've found that other military spouses, once they self-disclose to me, we support one another in our careers as well, which is wonderful.
I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Making Sense podcast. Like I said, there's much more information in show notes. Chelsea, I can't wait to see you again. It's great to catch up with you again here.
Thank you, Clay.
Navy Federal Credit Union is federally insured by the National Credit Union Administration. This podcast is intended to provide general information and shouldn't be considered legal, tax, or financial advice. It's always a good idea to consult a tax or financial professional for specific information on how certain laws may apply to your individual financial situation. References to and participation with the military community does not constitute organizational endorsement. Navy Federal is an equal housing lender. Navy Federal Credit Union are members of the mission.